Study Bassers. One of the first and most important things for you to learn is how musicians name notes. So we name notes with something called the musical alphabet. And if you want to be able to communicate with other musicians, or you want to study the lessons on StudyBass or anywhere else, you need to know how we name the notes. So I'm going to start you out first showing you on the piano how the notes are named, because it's very visual and it makes it a lot easier for you to understand. And then I'm going to show you how it works on the bass. In music, there are 12 notes in total. Okay, I know it seems like there should be way more than that, but it's really just the same set of 12 notes repeating itself again and again at what we call different octaves. Now, the musical alphabet uses the first 7 letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. These fit the white keys of the piano, and they're called natural notes. After the 7 letters, it just repeats again. But we're still missing 5 notes, and this is where the black keys of the piano come in. In between most of the natural notes, there's another note, and we name these in relationship to the natural notes A through G using what we call sharps and flats. So the sharp symbol looks like a pound symbol or a number sign. And sharp just means one note higher, the very next note above. That means the black key above the note A is called A sharp. So here's A, and the very next note is A sharp. So to remember the term sharp, picture a sharp tack pointing up. The opposite of a sharp is a flat. The flat symbol looks very close to a lowercase letter B. Now, flat just means one note lower. It's the very next note below. That means the black key below the note B is called B flat. So to remember the term flat, just picture a flat tire going down. Something confusing at first is that the same note can have multiple names. For example, the note above A can be called A sharp, but that same note is also one below B and could be called B flat. The same notes sharing multiple names are called enharmonic notes. So A sharp and B flat are said to be enharmonic. Now, how do you know when to call a note with its sharp name or flat name? Well, many times there are rules for which one to use, but for now, just get comfortable with the idea that notes can have more than one name. Now that you know the natural notes A through G and what sharps and flats are, let's walk through the entire musical alphabet. The first note of the alphabet is A. Next is a black key in between A and B, and we could call this note A sharp or B flat. The next note is B. And now notice there's no black key in between B and C. The next note is just C. You need to remember that there's no note between B and C. It just skips right from B to C. This is one of 2 exceptions. Now, we continue on. Above C is C sharp or D flat. Next is D. Then D sharp or E flat. And then E. And now, just like between B and C, there's also no note in between E and F. So the next note is F. So to remember these 2 exceptions, remember the phrase, big cats eat fish. So B, C, and E and F don't have a note in between them. Okay, moving on from F, you next have F sharp or G flat. Then we have G. Then we have G sharp or A flat. And then we're back to A. So notice G sharp and A flat are connecting or bridging the alphabet back to the beginning. After that, the musical alphabet just repeats again. So we have A, and then A sharp and B flat, B, C, C sharp or D flat, D, and so on. Your first assignment is to learn to recite the musical alphabet from memory. So you don't need an instrument for this. You can just do this when you're walking around and you have idle time. And you just have to work it out in your head. And as long as you know 3 things, you shouldn't have a problem doing that. So you need to remember that it's the natural notes A through G, and then what sharps and flats are. So a sharp is 1 note higher and a flat is 1 note lower. And then lastly, that there's no note between B and C and E and F. So remember, big cats eat fish. Learn to recite the musical alphabet 2 ways. First, going up using sharps. Be A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and back to A. The second way is going down using the flats. So you start on A, and then A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, C, B, B flat, and back to A. Now going down always confuses people, and that's totally normal. Just take your time. Now let's look at how the musical alphabet works on the strings of the bass. And it's really the same for any stringed instrument. If it's guitar or violin or cello, the musical alphabet always works the same way on every string. You can think of each string like a separate piano keyboard with the musical alphabet moving from low to high. Now the reason I showed you the piano first is because with its black and white key layout, it's very visual and it makes a lot of sense where the sharps and flats fall. But on the bass, all of the notes, they just look the same. Now you might expect that the dots on the fretboard represent notes in some clear logical way, but they really don't. They're just markers to help you keep your place. So you will notice that the dots fall on frets 3, 5, 7, and 9, and then you have double dots on the fret 12. And then beyond that, it just repeats itself. Now, each string of the bass is tuned to a specific note, and each fret of each string is just like a key on the piano. So we have these individual notes, just like going up the keys of the piano. So the bottom string of the bass, as we call it, is tuned to the note E. But I want to make things a little bit easier on you at first, and we're going to start on the next string, which is tuned to the note A. So the open string, if you just pluck the string by itself, when it rings by itself, it's the note A. Now, when we press the first fret down, we get the note A sharp or B flat. Remember, the same note can have 2 different names. So it's one note, but it has 2 names, A sharp or B flat. Then we go up to the next note and we have the note B. And then remember, between B and C, there's no note. So the very next fret is C. So it's just like there's no black key in between the B and C keys on the piano, there's no note in between the B and C on the bass. Then our next note is C sharp or D flat. Then we have the note D. Then we have the note D sharp or E flat. Then we have E. And then what's after E? We go straight to F. So remember, eat fish. So we had big cats eat fish. And then after F, we have F sharp or G flat. Then we have the note G. Then we have the note G sharp or A flat. And that's bringing us back to the beginning of the alphabet at the 12th fret, A. So remember I said there's only 12 notes. So at the 12th fret, that's where the string repeats, or the musical alphabet repeats. and it just continues on up again. Each string of your bass works the exact same way. It's just a matter of what note each string is tuned to. The lowest pitched string on your bass is tuned to the note E. And then what would the next note be? It would be F. Remember, there's no note between E and F. And then the next note is F sharp or G flat. And then we have the note G. And then we have G sharp or A flat. And then we go back to the beginning of the musical alphabet. It's A, and then A sharp or B flat, and then B, and then C, and so on. And then the D string is going to work the same way as well. It's open D, and then you have D sharp or E flat, E, F, and then F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp or A flat, and then A. G string also works the same way. G, and then G sharp or A flat, A sharp or B flat, and then B, and then C, and so on. So it's like you have 4 staggered piano keyboards under your fingers at all times. A good way to practice the musical alphabet on your bass is to play the notes on the A string up and down as you say the note names out loud. That way, if you get to the 12th fret and you're not saying A again, then you must have made a mistake somewhere. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and A. Memorizing all of the notes on the fretboard is really important, but in your first few months of playing, it's not urgent, so don't panic and feel like you have to memorize all of these notes before you can do anything. In future lessons, we'll work on a systematic way of learning all of the note names. One last thing, don't forget to take the quiz on StudyBass and test your musical alphabet knowledge.